This is the lecture for Government 2.5, the last section of Chapter 2. Short lecture here talking about ratifying the Constitution. Now, before everyone could agree to sign the Constitution, which included the Great Compromise, the Three-Fifths Compromise, the whole idea of the bicameral legislature, what the president should do, etc., there were two distinct and rival camps that formed, the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists. The Anti-Federalists were anti-constitution, anti-big government, and they feared that the new government would become a tyranny. Patrick Henry is the one who led the charge for the Anti-Federalists, so it's not a bunch of crackpots. It's a lot of people saying, hey, we fought to get away from England because it was too big of a government. Let's not do it here in America. The big points that he made, and it's on the left-hand side of the screen here, that there's a big thing is just that whole idea of a fear of tyranny. You don't want anyone to take over. Also, a popular government in a territory as large as the United States would become impossible to rule because of all of the competing factions. We have North and South, East, West, small state, big state, slavery, anti-slavery, that if we had just one government, really powerful at the top, it could become really messy. His next biggie is we needed to have a Bill of Rights. Just like in the Northwest Ordinance that protected basic freedoms, we needed to have this to protect the people. Now, the Constitution does not start with this. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, do not happen for about another year after ratification. Plain and simple, Patrick Henry was afraid that the government would be too powerful. And he was really afraid that the president would be like a king. People were already referring to George Washington as His Excellency, that he was really afraid, Patrick Henry was, that things were going to be just get out of hand. Now on the flip side, you have the Federalists, who are pro-Constitution, and the leaders of this group really become the who's who of early American history. They become the first 6 presidents, the first Supreme Court Justice, first Secretary of the Treasury. So these are the big players. They argued that the Constitution was going to work because a couple of big things here. First, the 3 branches, the executive, legislative, and judicial, would check each other so no branch would become too powerful. Also, a Bill of Rights was not necessary because any power not given to the federal government were given to the states and the people. So you don't need to create a list of laws that say, hey, this is what we have, because the Constitution specifically says if it's not here, it's given to the states. Now, this leads to the Battle of Ratification. The state of New York was actually against it. State of North Carolina voted against it first. Now, ratification, that's the signing and the approval of the Constitution, was not an easy thing. Most people thought that the small states would be against the Constitution, but because the Senate was based on equal representation, they were actually happy. They signed it right away. The 2 states that are really against it are Virginia and New York. Now, to gain support, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Madison's the one who actually wrote the Constitution, and John Jay wrote 85 news articles that are published by Ben Franklin in all of his papers. They're later called the Federalist Papers. These articles tried to publicly answer all of the objections that the Anti-Federalists posed. Now, even when they got the public support behind it, states of Virginia and New York were still against it. And had they left, our country would look geographically much different today. Now, the only way that Virginia and New York would agree to ratify, and they eventually sign, is when they are given the promise that in the first session of Congress they would pass the Bill of Rights. There were originally 12, 10 make it initially, one comes through about 200 years later. But after all of this long process, the whole idea of the Federalists, Anti-Federalists, which is the big idea, we get a Constitution and we have a new government. Make sure you finish the study guide. This ends Chapter 2. There's a homework assignment that's going to take you a little bit of time on this one.